There's a lot of debate about consoles pretty much all the time, but some things are just bad. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 10 worst decisions by console makers. Number 10, people hate that the iPhone doesn't have a headphone jack on it, but the Game Boy Advance SP, well, did it first. Now, Nintendo had a reason for it. They claimed that it was because they needed to pack in a lot of stuff, which is something we also have heard from Apple. But people who have taken apart the Game Boy Advance SP can at least verify that it's very tightly packed. However, making it so that you can't charge at the same time as have headphones in the thing, because the headphones use the charging port by way of a dongle that doesn't come with the Game Boy Advance SP. And if you want a dongle that charges and uses headphones at the same time, there were only third-party ones. Yeah, they didn't use that standard in the next Nintendo handheld. Number 9 is the PSP Go. Now, the PSP Go itself was actually a fairly alright handheld. It just went all digital, and that was a no-no, back in 2009. And I don't actually want to crap on the design of the PSP Go. I kind of like what they did, but it had 16 gigabytes of internal memory. You could extend that to 32 with a memory stick micro, and internet wasn't as accessible and readily available back in 2009, at least internet that you would happily use a handheld to download games that were several gigabytes apiece. Number 8 is the Wii Mini, which, let's just go ahead and say, isn't terrible on its own, but it has no internet capabilities at all. That was one of the biggest omissions in order to make it a mini console, and you know what they bundled it with? Mario Kart Wii, perhaps the best online game on the Wii. I mean, that's subjective, but it's also kind of taunting anybody who buys it not realizing that they don't have online play with their Wii Mini. Hey, the best online game, or at least one of the best, we included it, but you can't do that stuff, so enjoy. Can you imagine if that was the commercials for it? I actually can, because the announcement kind of felt like that. Number 7, I'm just gonna say the word Kinect. Now, there's redeeming stuff about the Kinect. I'm not saying that it was a total wash, but through a series of really bizarre decisions as to how the Xbox will connect with the Kinect, either a USB or a proprietary port, and not being sure which of the two that they wanted when they made the Xbox One S, and also announcing that Kinect was going to be over probably more times than I can remember, just mishandling the whole thing, and also what it is, which is essentially a camera. Although I will say everybody hating the Kinect is kind of funny, considering everybody loves the Alexa, which is probably a much greater invasion of your privacy than the Kinect ever could have been. But it's probably not really something that makes the decisions to do the Kinect better, and how they handled it, switching it to USB, and they didn't even bother with it, really. They tried to push it really hard at the start, and then they were stuck with it when they found that very few people cared. Number 6 is using cartridges for the Nintendo 64, and what this may sound like is a criticism of a piece of hardware that was frankly very well received, had a lot of classics on it that used those cartridges. But let's talk about Zelda for a second. Zelda had another version of Zelda coming to the 64DD peripheral as kind of an expansion / alternate version with extra content that had been cut from the original Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The 64DD existed almost exactly for this type of reason, for expansions that couldn't fit onto the cartridges. Now, it became an expensive prospect and they didn't end up implementing it, and we didn't see the Master Quest content until much later on the GameCube and then in the 3DS remaster. But imagine if they'd just gone with like a bigger storage media from the get-go. It's not something that just affected Zelda. That's actually one of quite a few different examples. Number 5, it's the Xbox 360 using the HD DVD format instead of Blu-ray. Now, the likely main reason for this is that Sony owned the Blu-ray format. That was, of course, something that a competitor would obviously not want to do. But funny thing about that, the HD DVD format was technically quite a bit inferior to the Blu-ray format. HD DVD had a significantly smaller storage capacity, and at that point in time this really mattered because you would buy a game and have to install it off of multiple DVDs, specifically later in the console's life cycle, which was kinda silly. But also the PS3 really benefited in that movie studios backed the Blu-ray format. It had more space, you had to do less to make something look pristine, and frankly, having it in their video game console and owning the format itself made it an inherent advantage for Sony. In the meantime, Xbox 360 looked kinda silly in some respects. Number 4 on Game Boy Advance, there is no backlight. I can't even imagine like a portable screen without a backlight at this point in time. And like, we'll go ahead and say this, the original Game Boy didn't have a backlight, but when they came up with like smaller versions of the Game Boy, it did. You would think that after they did the Game Boy Light in 1998, pretty much every single Game Boy would have a backlight. That was wrong. Just 3 years later, the Game Boy Advance hit, and nope. Number 3 is the Philips CDI controller that they released the console with because it was hilarious. As a media controller, not terrible, and they were trying to sell the CDI as both a media thing and a gaming thing in one, which was not a good idea. In the 1990s, people did not want that, and these controllers were literally geared entirely towards media consumption. If you tried to use them to play a game, it's silly. I mean, later, when they decided, well, people seem to want a gaming thing but not a media thing, they've released real controllers for it, but it was too late. Number 2, the Nokia N-gage, which, I mean, you could just talk about various things about the Nokia N-gage, but I think probably the most interesting bad decision they made for it was the fact that with the first version, the one that everyone was introduced to the N-gage with, the one that everybody bought when it first came out, which was the most important thing, because that was what everybody who did have it was going to tell everybody who didn't have it about. And as they say, word of mouth is the most powerful advertising. That works both ways, positive and negative. You had to remove the back, which was the battery compartment, to be clear, and the batteries to get to the spot where you could change game cards. It was behind the batteries. I don't even have to like explain that further. That's astounding. That's such a bad idea. They understood that immediately too, because word of mouth was terrible, and the second version of the N-gage didn't have that. Of course, their main problem was that it could never not be the N-gage. It was always going to be the N-gage. And finally, number 1 is Nintendo's Virtual Boy. And when I say the Virtual Boy, I don't know what to say that wasn't a bad decision about the Virtual Boy. You could call the N-gage a problem all you want, but the Virtual Boy eclipses that just in every possible way. Where to start? There were only a few games for the damn thing. Mario Tennis was certainly not enough for me either, and it seemed to be the most interesting among them. The screen was 2 colors, black and red, and you could actually kind of just say it was one color, red, if you really wanted. And it used 2D parallax and the projection of obviously 2 slightly different images to create the illusion of 3D, but truthfully nothing of it was actually 3D, and it was kind of advertised as virtual reality, which is blatantly false. It is not virtual reality. Virtual reality is like not even perfect now, but like a vaguely 3D Mario Tennis game, not virtual reality. Also, it was really expensive and it was super uncomfortable, and it also made me really sick. Just everything about it was bad. They should not have released that to the public. It was a menace. What's the worst console decision you can remember? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think, and if you like this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell. As always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.